guys, welcome back to my channel. Tonight I want to, or today whenever I post this and whenever you're watching it, I want to talk about my pregnancy with Andrew, my first and only pregnancy so far, and his Down syndrome diagnosis. So I had a few minutes tonight to jump on here and hopefully speed talk through it, because it's kind of a long story, or really I make it into a long story because I'm notoriously a talker. So if you get me on a subject, I will probably talk until I can't anymore. So I'll try to make this like a condensed version, a shorter version, but I just really wanted to get this out there. And so first of all, because it's been over a year since I've been pregnant, so I don't want to forget anything as time goes on. And so yeah, I want to try to do this now, even though it's been a long time coming. So yeah, let's just jump on into it. Alright, so I found out I was pregnant in February of 2018. We had been trying for just a month, so we were really lucky and fortunate. We did not have to try to conceive very long. I was I was using those ovulation strips. I got a pack off of Amazon. Like, they were like 50 little like cheap test strips for ovulation, and then it came with like 20 pregnancy tests. So I started to use those in like December of 2017, and we ended up getting pregnant though in January of 2018. Found out at the beginning of February, and a little funny story about that was these ovulation strips, they were great for the ovulation part. However, which I can't fault them for this, but they were very just cheap, little tiny, like they're like thin test strips. So they're probably not like 100% accurate all the time, and you know, they're not the most in detail or whatever. So I had some of those just cheapo pregnancy tests. I didn't want to go out and buy anything expensive until I really thought that I was pregnant. And I'm the type of person, I am so impatient. So literally, I don't even know if I was 9 days past DPO, or oh my gosh, 9 days past ovulation or DPO. I'm not even sure if I was 9 days. And I was like, I just have to take one. And you know, I had all these things in my head. I'm like, oh, I definitely feel nauseous, or I feel really tired, and all the classic pregnancy symptoms. So I ended up taking a test pretty early, and I took it I think one evening, and nothing showed up. So the next morning I was like, all right, I'm gonna try it again. So I took another one, and I literally all morning long convinced myself that there was a line. I took a picture of it. I like did all of these photo editing tips to it. So I increased the contrast, I decreased the brightness, all of these little hacks to try to get that second line to come up. I was convinced. So I even took a picture of the one from the night before, then the one from the like that morning. I did all these little hacks and edits to this photo. I even drew an arrow over top of where I thought I saw a second line, sent it to one of my friends who had been pregnant before, and I was like, girl, do you see it? Because I see it. And she is the sweetest thing, and texted back and was like, you know, maybe, but maybe wait a little bit longer and see. So but I was convinced. So later that day I texted John, my husband, and I was like, you have to get me some pregnancy tests from the store. Just get me a couple cheap ones, but I just want a couple to see. So I had this big plan of how I wanted to announce to him that I was pregnant. I was either going to do some sort of little present, or we have 2 dogs who are our first babies. So I was going to do something with them or something cute. I looked up all of these pregnancy announcement to husband. I'd literally been watching these on YouTube for weeks and weeks and weeks, trying to figure out how to perfectly announce to my husband and to my family that I was pregnant. Well, like I said earlier, I'm a very impatient person, so that flew out the window. I took the test in front of him and we watched together. We started flipping out when the positive sign came up. We actually just got like the blue dye pregnancy test, which a lot of people say are not as accurate. So, but they did say positive. So I was like, okay, I'm positive. I'm pregnant. So instead of doing something cute for my family and our, everything like that, we went that night, literally that night, and we drove to my mom's house. I threw the pregnancy test down on her counter and I was screaming, I'm pregnant, I'm pregnant. Her and my stepmom flipped out. They were crying, they were screaming. It was hilarious. So then we were also calling the rest of our siblings, Andrew's other grandparents, all along the way. We ended up going to Kroger, which is just a grocery store around here, and getting 2 more pregnancy tests, 2 more packs. So I wanted to get the pink lined ones because I'd heard that those ones are a little more accurate. And then I also wanted to get one that said yes or no, or pregnant or not pregnant, because I thought that's going to be way more accurate. So got those, and I didn't take those till the next morning, but they were also positive, and the rest is history. So from there we told just our close friends. We had already told our family, so we just told close friends in the the next few days to a week. We tried to, whoever we saw in person, we tried to tell them in person. If not, we tried to call or Skype them or FaceTime. So we did that, and then, so kind of trying to go in order, I started getting actual pregnancy symptoms when I was about 6 to 8 weeks along. So before then, I was like, man, pregnancy is easy. I didn't have any sort of pregnancy symptoms. I had kind of faked some in the beginning because I was convincing myself I was pregnant, but I wasn't nauseous. I wasn't really that tired maybe a little bit, but not nauseous. So I was like, if this is what pregnancy is like, I'm in, I'm game, this is sweet. So then it hit me about 6 to 8 weeks in. I started getting really nauseous. I actually never threw up during my pregnancy, which I'm really lucky. I know a lot of people who get really sick, but I actually was fortunate. I did not get sick my entire pregnancy. I just was really nauseous the whole time. Meat smells to me were just unbearable. And then in it was between 6 and 8 weeks, I also got a really bad sinus, cold, congestion, all that put me out for about a week, because when you're pregnant you can't take a lot of medicine. So I literally, I work from home, so when I could, I would just go and take a nap, on my lunch break or right after work. So that took a lot out of me at the very beginning. So then, sorry, my dog Raven just came in. So after that, like I said, I was pretty nauseous, but that was pretty much, that was the worst symptom that I had until later in my pregnancy. So from there, I actually did have to do, at 11 weeks, I had to do an initial gestational diabetes screening, because I do have diabetes in my family history, and also I am a plus size curvy girl, so kind of that automatically fits you into the category. So I had to, at 11 weeks, go and do an initial 1-hour gestational diabetes screening. I actually passed that, and so I wasn't really concerned about that. and then which I can make a whole other video about gestational diabetes, because you'll find out here in a minute I actually did have gestational diabetes later in the pregnancy. So I'll make another video about that at some point and just talk about my experience with that, tips and tricks, what I ate, things like that. So from there, we announced on Easter of 2018, we announced to the rest of the world. I ended up doing like a cute little Easter basket. So I had a basket, I put some greenery, some floral in there, very just spring colors. I had some Easter eggs that I wrote like baby and then our last name, and then October 2018, that's when he was supposed to be due. So, and then I just took a picture of that and posted it. So it was pretty cute. I had like our ultrasound in there and stuff. So that was pretty cool. I announced that, and then from there, second trimester honestly went by like very quickly. I do remember in our first trimester, kind of back up just a little bit, when I was about, I think like 10 or 11 weeks, one of my first appointments, they did offer to do just some routine genetic testing. I don't remember what it's exactly called, but they test for like a few different things. My husband and I, John, we declined testing because in our minds, we're very open. You do what you want. You're not harming me, whatever you're doing. So for me though, I decided that if we did find out that our child had some sort of genetic or chromosomal abnormality, then we would want to keep him or her. So we always declined blood testing because it just wasn't something that was important to us. So our doctor knew that. She was really great about it, and she never really pushed me. She actually was kind of against the testing because she said that she has seen way too many couples have issues after getting the testing with like their marriage. So she's like, unless something will change your mind, just don't do it. So I really appreciate that from her, because it made me feel more sound with our decision not to do that. So we did not do testing at that point in time. Skip forward, second trimester went by fairly easily. I think about 16 weeks I stopped being totally nauseous. I got some energy back and things were going pretty fine. I was getting excited to figure out, if we were having a boy or a girl, and so that was exciting. So then our 20-week anatomy scan, I think I had mine at 19 weeks, but I'll just call it the 20-week anatomy scan. We went in, routine everything. At that one, they do a full anatomy of the child. So they head to toe, they're looking for any sort of abnormalities, any sort of like red flags that something could be wrong. So, and not wrong, but like something could be a little off that they might need to keep an eye on. So the first thing, we did want to know the gender. Like I've said a few times now, I'm not a patient person. My husband's not patient. So we did not want to wait to do like a gender reveal or anything like that. We wanted to find out right then and there and us know, and then we could announce it as we felt we should. So we went ahead and found out that we were having a boy, and at that point the ultrasound tech told us, and then she said, I also want to tell you that it looks like there's some fluid on his kidneys, and that's actually the first reason why I thought you were having a boy, not because his private parts, but because of the fluid on the kidneys. Apparently this is super common in little boys and any child in general, but this is a very common thing that happens. There's extra fluid on the kidneys that typically just drains off or absorbs throughout the rest of the pregnancy, or if it doesn't, it typically comes out within the first couple of comes off of the kidneys within the first couple of urinations after birth. So nobody was very concerned. The amount of fluid around his kidneys was so tiny that they almost didn't even have to report it report it to me, because the amount was so small. So at that point, no one said anything about Down syndrome until we went in. So the ultrasound tech did the actual readings and screenings, and then we went to have just a regular checkup with my doctor, where she was going to talk about what was seen and, interpret everything. So we went in to see her, and that was the first time in my pregnancy, 19 weeks along, that I heard the words Down syndrome in context to my baby. So it had been before that, it had been, we can do some blood work and screening, but that was all other babies and that was all other people, not me. So this was the first time that the words Down syndrome were in context to the child I was carrying in my body. So that was a little scary. She told me that fluid on the kidneys can be, it's not always, but it can be a soft marker for Down syndrome. And what a soft marker is something that is a little abnormal, that could happen with other kids, but if you have multiple soft markers all together, then you have a higher chance of having a child with either Down syndrome or some other genetic disorder or something. I'm not a doctor, so don't quote me on any of that. That's just kind of what, from a real mom's perspective, that's what the knowledge I gained. So when she told me that soft marker for Down syndrome, all I heard was Down syndrome, which, it's scary as hearing that for the first time. And I know many, many other moms who were scared when they heard those words too. So I will never judge another mom for being scared of that. Although I love my child unconditionally, it's scary to think. It's a fear of the unknown. It's something that maybe you're not familiar with. I personally did not have a huge knowledge and understanding about Down syndrome, what it was. I really couldn't have told you before then what Down syndrome was and what a life with Down syndrome could entail, both for myself, my child. So it was scary, but we were told that this, like I said, was so common and that we really had nothing to be concerned about. We'd keep monitoring the kidneys, and then we could kind of go from there. So, I cried on the way home from that appointment. It's scary, like I said, but my husband is a super logical, he doesn't think with his emotions like I do. So in his mind, we're just going to tackle each thing that comes along to us. We don't know for a fact that he has Down syndrome. We don't know for a fact that that this fluid on his kidneys could last, whatever. So that kind of helped me bring me back to reality. But the first thing I did when I got home is I Googled Down syndrome. And honestly, that freaked me out even more. It's just, you don't get a great, and this is part of the reason I want to advocate and talk about Down syndrome and normalize it, is because a lot of times if you just Google Down syndrome, you get this really clinical, stuffy opinion about what Down syndrome is. You don't get that familiar, that loving, caring. I mean, it's all just it's just that doctor jargon, that clinical terms about Down syndrome and developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities and things like that. So you're not really seeing the true, what a life is with a child with Down syndrome. So that freaked me out even more, gonna be honest. But, like I said, we had always said that just was going to be what it was going to be. Our child was going to be our child, so just move forward. So rest of my second trimester, I think, went pretty well. I had a lot of energy until the very end of my second trimester. I did start getting a lot of pelvic pain. I don't know if he dropped early or what happened, but that, like, sometimes I couldn't walk. It hurt so bad. I had back pain and pelvic pain. So that was toward like the end of my second trimester. Then going into my third, at 28 weeks, I did have just a normal doctor's appointment with my OB, and she wanted me to have go and do another gestational diabetes screening. So she recommended that I do the 1 hour again. So went and did that. I did fail the 1 hour, and then so I had to go do the 3 hour screening, which is where you go and then they draw your blood at fasting and then you drink the liquid, I think, or something. I don't know. I can figure all that out and then do another video. But anyway, so I had to go do the 3 hour. I did end up failing that one, so I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And so one of the first things that I had to do was go see a nutritionist, and that was a great experience, honestly. She gave me a lot of tips and tricks that I'm trying to use now as we prepare for hopefully starting to try for another child. So that was super helpful, and like I said, I'll do another video on that. But so I had gestational diabetes. With that are some risks. So one of the risks of that are having a child who is bigger, and then another one is having a stillbirth. So one of the things that happens when you have that, at least with my hospital, is you have to go for extra in-depth ultrasounds, and you have to meet with what's called a maternal fetal medicine doctor. It's basically just another like OBGYN who specializes in maternal fetal medicine and high-risk pregnancies. So you have to go and meet with one of them. They do in-depth ultrasounds. Basically, it's like an anatomy scan every like 2 weeks. So I had to go do those, and then twice a week I had to start doing what are called non-stress tests, or NSTs. So what I would have to do for that is I'd actually have to go to our hospital, get hooked up to some heart rate monitors for the baby, so they go like around my belly. I'd have 2 bands on my belly, and one would be monitoring the movement of Andrew and one would be monitoring his heart rate, so while he was moving. So what I had to do those twice a week for 4 weeks before we got to some other stuff. So basically, my first, going back to the MFM, the maternal fetal medicine doctors, basically I had to start seeing them at about like 32 weeks. So I went, and my first appointment with them, I had, like I said, an in-depth ultrasound, just like an anatomy scan, and I could tell something was wrong when the ultrasound tech, she was doing all of the measurements, and I noticed that on the screen, because we could see what everything was, I noticed on the screen that there were a couple measurements that said gestational age like 32 weeks, and like basically the age of what the measurements were, and it would say like 26 weeks. So it was like 6 weeks behind what my gestational age was. So I could tell that when she was done, I said, "Oh, okay, how did everything look?" And she just kind of gave me a look like not everything went as well as we hoped. So she never said that, but she said, "I'm just gonna go review with the doctor first." So then I had our maternal fetal medicine doctor come in. She was super great about it, but did let us know that Andrew had what are called short long bones. So basically it's the top of your shoulder to your elbow and the top of your hip to your knee, those are your long bones, and his were growing too short. She told us that this can be genetic. This can just be something that somebody in our family might have that. And you know, my husband and I are taller people. My husband is 6 foot and I am 5'9", but he comes from a very large family who a lot of them are shorter. And my family, I'm an anomaly too, my siblings and I, but a lot of my family is also shorter. So we're thinking, we just have short family, we're tall, so maybe something kind of is off. We're just gonna have a child that's maybe a little bit shorter. So then she, a second time, heard the words Down syndrome. So she said, you know, it could just be your genetic makeup, but a lot of times we see this with children with Down syndrome or achondroplasia, which is like a smaller person. So again, ding ding, heard the words Down syndrome again, and it, you know, I kept it together in the room. She again said it may not be, but just this is another soft marker. So, and at this point we had 2 soft markers that were showing Down syndrome. So held it together during that. As soon as we got in the car, I was a hot mess, bawling my eyes out. And it's one of those things that sometimes I feel guilty about feeling like that, but I also know that I was scared, and not because I didn't think I would love my child, but because I was scared of the unknown. I didn't know anything about Down syndrome. I didn't know what it meant to raise a child with, you know, you Google Down syndrome, like I said, and all of these disabilities come up. So in my mind, I'm just thinking, you know, this is going to be, it's going to be hard. So that's scary. The unknown is scary. So I never in a million years thought that I wouldn't love my child, but I just thought, I'm scared of what's going to happen and the unknown. So, you know, that's what happened. We, again, decided, and at that point they asked me again if I wanted to do any sort of just low-level blood work to see if there was like a higher probability of Down syndrome. And I actually ordered the lab work. I was supposed to go in for the screenings, and then I decided to cancel because after John and I talked about it again, we just decided that to us, what is this, like, why put that stress and that pressure on ourselves if something, you know, if it's not going to be true, because it only can give you a percentage of, like a percentage or a ratio of like how many to whatever is it would be to have a child with Down syndrome. So it's not 100% yes or no. So at least that's how I was explained. So we decided again, it's just not worth it to us. So again, I did Google a little bit more, but I stopped myself because I'm like, you know what, you're gonna freak yourself out, which in hindsight I feel like I should have maybe just figured some more stuff out because I felt very unprepared. But, you know, you live and you learn. So I had these NSTs going, so we're going to jump back to those non-stress tests. And every time I went in, my blood pressure was high. So every time I went in there, twice a week, they had to do preeclampsia blood work on me. And my veins are not easy to find. They do not like to have blood drawn. So it was not very fun. So twice a week I would be in there, and what's supposed to take 20 to 30 minutes would take me 2 to 3 hours. And I would a lot of time have to go after we ate dinner because we both work during the day. So we would be there until 10 o'clock at night, maybe later. I did have one time that my blood pressure was really high, and I was having something that I thought was a contraction, which ended up being like gas pain. So whatever, pregnancy issues. But so I ended up One of my last, I saw the maternal fetal medicine doctor again, and basically her and my doctor decided that if my blood pressure stayed elevated, they would have to induce me. So the decision was made at 37 weeks I would be induced. So I was supposed to be induced on a Friday night, because I figured if I get induced on a Friday night, I would have the baby over sometime over the weekend and not have to take off vacation time, like extra, you know. So then we went in that Tuesday for our final NST. I was going to do that one, and because I had to do them twice a week, I could do them whenever I wanted. So I went in for my final NST. We even got like a nice dinner before because we were celebrating, and yeah, so went in for the final one. My OB happened to be doing rounds that night, and it was her night on call at the hospital. So she saw me when I went in for my final NST, and I told her, this is the last one. I'll see you on Friday. We're gonna get induced. So she actually came back to see me while I was having my NST, and she's like, your blood pressure's too high. I do not feel comfortable with sending you home when it's like this, so we're gonna induce right now. What? Like, I was not prepared. I had not showered that day. Like, I'm gonna be real, I work from home. Sometimes, like, well, I think I showered, but I didn't wash my hair. I hadn't washed my hair in days. So, because I had a whole preparation. I was gonna shave my legs, I was gonna shave my armpits, I was gonna I just was gonna get all prepared, wash my hair, straighten it, like bring my dry shampoo. Luckily we had our bag packed, and so it was on. John ran home. He was like, do I have time to go home and get our bag, put our dogs away, like do all this stuff? And she was like, oh yeah, like you've got plenty of time. So they ended up taking me to labor and delivery, and we started on the induction methods. So I might skip through a little bit of all of that, because I think I'll make another video that I talk about how I gave birth, because that is a whole story in and of itself. So we're gonna skip over to, because I really wanted this to be about like finding out that Andrew had Down syndrome or has Down syndrome. So we're gonna kind of skip over that. It was a very lengthy process, a pretty scary one, and so stay tuned for another video on that one. But also, it's like getting dark outside, and I'm trying to rush this video so that I have a little bit of light and you're not just talking to me in the dark. So skip forward. Andrew was born on September 27th, 2018 at 4:01 a.m. Best minute of my entire life. I actually only got to see him for a few seconds to give him a kiss, and then he was actually rushed to the NICU because he was not breathing right. So they took him to the NICU. I actually did not get to see him. They took me from, I'll just tell you now, I had a C-section, but they took me from the operating room to a recovery like suite, and I got some medicine that made me really out of it. And then finally, like hours later, they took me down to the NICU. They wheeled me, they called it like a drive-by. So they wheeled me in my hospital bed through the NICU, let me stop and basically take a picture with him, say hi, and then they wheeled me up to my long-term recovery room. So we did that, and so at that point I got to, the next time I could go down and see him was later on in the afternoon. So went down to the NICU. At that point he was, when I went down to see him, it was pretty intense. He had wires and a CPAP and, all of this stuff, trying to make sure that he was breathing right. He needed some help with that. So it was it was very scary as a first-time mom, seeing your child covered in things. Like, I literally couldn't see his face because he had a CPAP on over his nose that went up to like over his head, and he had like a cap on, so you really couldn't see his head. He was laying face down, not face down, but on his tummy, and they in the NICU they're allowed to basically break the ABCs of sleep or safe sleep, because they need to keep kids in like a comfortable positions with all the little wires and the tubing and stuff. So they had him laying on his belly, his head was turned, he had this big CPAP machine on, he has wires all over, he had a feeding tube in, just the whole 9 yards. So that was my first real look at my son, and I mean, I obviously felt absolutely in love. Like, this kid he's my everything. So at that point, John and I were just soaking it in as much as we could. It's hard having your child in the NICU and seeing your child like that, especially your first child. You really don't know what to expect, and then this happens. So yeah, so we were just trying to soak all of that in and really make some good memories and like remember what he looked like and all that stuff. So we then got a visit from our maternal fetal medicine doctor. She actually, where the NICU is, her office is like literally down the hall. So I think she probably comes down and checks it out. In hindsight, I think she came down to see us because she knew he had Down syndrome, but we didn't know at that point. So then we were just standing there oohing and aahing over our new baby, and she comes, and she's just sitting there chatting with us nonchalant, like, oh, he's so sweet, I'm just so happy that everything worked out fine. And then she said, so yeah, and then you know that he has Down syndrome too. And we, like, my heart stopped. I said, what? No, nobody told us that. And she said, oh, well, you knew that he could because we found those soft markers. And I said, well, yeah, but nobody's told us that, nobody's confirmed anything. And I never thought much more about it because I was so overwhelmed with the amount of doctor's appointments and NSTs and keeping my blood sugar under control and my hypertension under control, my blood pressure, that I never really like thought about it again. I mean, it was always in the back of my head that he had those couple soft markers, but honestly, it never crossed my mind that, because I saw him, and I think I had, for the 2 minutes I got to see him without any tubes and wires all over his face, I thought I would have a better picture of what I thought that I would know instantly if he had Down syndrome. And to me, he looked just like me, at least I thought. And all the nurses and the doctors were like, oh, he looks like Dad, and you know, just normal things like that. So in my mind, nobody told us when he came out, so like, why would he have Down syndrome? And he didn't. Like I said, in my brain, I thought there would be, like, he would have this very distinct look at birth if he did. So when she said this, I was like, I was in total shock. I had no clue. So I kind of panicked, and I started crying. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, not sorry about him having Down syndrome, but I'm sorry that, like, you're finding out like this. She's like, yeah, you know, he has the gap between his toe, and he has the thicker neck, and he's got the almond-shaped eyes. And she just kept naming off these features that, to me, I had no idea what that meant. Like I said before, I tried not to research Down syndrome too much because I just wanted to not stress about it if I couldn't. So I was like, what are you talking about, these physical features? And what does she mean, a gap between his toe and his eyes look almond shaped? Like, what is this lady talking about? So I had a panic attack. And so John took me directly back up to my room, and from there I have a history of like anxiety attacks. So I did have an anxiety attack. They had to put me on oxygen, but or just like a quick like oxygen treatment. But so while all that was going on, my OB, her medical student, the NICU doctor in charge, the MFM, maternal fetal medicine doctor, and I think one more, my personal nurse was in the room, and they were all like, we thought somebody told you, but it does look like he has Down syndrome. He has some physical features and the breathing issues and all these things. And I'm like, what? So I still was like in complete shock. So at that point, everybody cleared out. I was doing my breathing treatment. I just was trying to settle down. And guys, after you have a baby, your hormones are intense, no matter what. So anything, the drop of a hat, drop of a dime, whatever, anything will set you off to just cry uncontrollably. So just the fact that it hadn't even been 24 hours since I'd given birth, I had been induced for like 2.5 days before that. I was running on little to no sleep. I just found out that somebody thought that there were physical features about my child resembling Down syndrome. So I cried for a while, and then picked myself back up because John, my husband, is my rock, and he made me pick myself back up. I mean, he obviously had some emotions too, but he is a glass half full type of guy. So we did not dwell on that very long. We just said, okay, it's okay, but now we're gonna go love on our baby. So at that point, I just wanted to go down and see him. I wanted to do my first skin to skin. So we did that, and then that made the world right. I did not see Down syndrome. I saw Andrew, and he was perfect. God, that kid, and he still is. So I did my first skin to skin with him, and then from that point, it was all a little bit of a blur. We had people coming and apologizing for the way that the news was brought to us. Nobody, and I will say this because I love this, nobody ever apologized that he had Down syndrome. Everybody was a little bit upset that the way that we found out, that's not how they intended to tell us, but nobody once apologized for him having Down syndrome. Everybody was very positive and was so excited for us. So that's not what every mom's experience is, and I feel really, really terrible because that's the type of experience you want to have. You want to have everybody cheering for you. So the next couple days were just filled with nurses and doctors and everybody coming by and showing us pictures of loved ones that they have with Down syndrome and really trying to make us feel great. It was overwhelming, I will tell you that, because still trying to process everything in my head, it just was overwhelming, but in a good way, because I felt so much love about it. And it's funny because the weekend that he was born was our city's buddy walk, which is a huge, pretty much I think every city in the United States has, it's called a buddy walk, and where you walk for Down syndrome awareness and you raise money for your local Down syndrome association. So, and actually Columbus, Ohio, which is where our Down syndrome association is, has the largest buddy walk in the United States. So at this point, so it was pretty cool, and people were just going on and on about this buddy walk, and we were like, what are they talking about? But I'm excited to attend my first one this year, so I'm going to do a vlog about that because it's going to be awesome. So yeah, so that was pretty much the next few days. It was overwhelming but very helpful. They got us a lot of information. They actually had like a genetic social worker, a genetic counselor come and talk us through what is Down syndrome? How does this happen? And it really put our minds at ease, knowing that, I don't want to sound harsh with this, but nothing we didn't do anything wrong. It just happens, and it's just literally the way a chromosome divided. So, you know, that's just how it is. He just has an extra chromosome. So when you simplify it like that, it's really not that overwhelming. And that's what I try to tell myself sometimes, is like, it's just an extra chromosome. So, yeah, we had a meeting with like a genetic counselor. We got some information about our local Down Syndrome Association. They actually reached out to us within a couple days of him being born, and really solidified a lot of my feelings. They told me it's okay for me to grieve if I want to grieve. It's okay for me to cry. It's okay for me to not understand. But just to know that those feelings will pass, and I will fall even more in love with my child, and he will have a beautiful life. So it was definitely an overwhelming experience, but I wouldn't change it for anything. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my relationship with my husband. I learned a lot about my husband. He is literally the strongest person I know. He was the one that called all of our friends and family and told them, because we had kind of kept them updated throughout the pregnancy about how we have these soft markers for Down syndrome. And all of our friends and family have been absolutely incredibly supportive. They all, as soon as we found out, they were learning about Down syndrome. They were learning about, you know, the terminology and what to say and what not to say, and what types of things he might need help with, and just different things like that. So it's just been an incredible experience, and it's not even a year yet. So I'm so excited to see what his life will be like. I already can tell you that he is just the absolute joy in our lives. He is such a crazy kid. So I'll do more on him, and I'll do some videos on like his development and his milestones, because those also vary a little bit, but he is just like any other kid. He just might develop in certain areas a little slower. He might a little quicker. It just kind of depends. So yeah, I think that's it. It's probably been way too long of a video, so I apologize, but I really wanted to talk about all of that. So if you like this video, make sure to thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I will talk more about Down syndrome, talk more about mom life, DIY projects, our home renovation. Please be on the lookout. I'm going to do a like mid-renovation tour, because we've got a lot of projects going on right now, and they're kind of in that middle, almost done, not quite. So I kind of want to do like a middle of the road video, and then I'll show you afterward what everything looks like. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and talk to you soon. Let me know if you want to see another video kind of like this, where I'm just kind of conversing and talking, and if you liked it, and make sure to introduce yourself. I'll say hi, and make sure to go like my Instagram. I just started one for this YouTube page, so make sure to go and like that.